Hello everyone, and welcome to History of the Ancient World. Today, we're embarking on a journey back in time, not to the grand battlefields or the opulent palaces of kings, but to the bustling streets and humble homes of ancient cities. What was it really like to live in places like Rome, Athens, or Babylon thousands of years ago? Forget the epic poems and grand statues for a moment. We're going to explore the daily grind, the sights, the sounds, and yes, even the smells of everyday life for ordinary people. From the morning routine to the evening meal, from the crowded marketplaces to the public baths, we'll uncover the realities of urban living in antiquity. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's peel back the layers of history to discover the vibrant, chaotic, and fascinating world of ancient city dwellers. Our first stop is the beating heart of any ancient city, the home. Now don't picture sprawling villas with private courtyards, unless you were part of the tiny, wealthy elite. For most people, home was a small, often cramped apartment in a multi-story building called an insula, especially in a densely populated city like Rome. These were the original apartment blocks, and they were a far cry from modern luxury. Most were built cheaply, with timber and mud brick, making them prone to fire and collapse. Imagine waking up not to an alarm clock, but to the sounds of your neighbors arguing through a thin wall, the clatter of carts on the cobblestone street below, and the shouts of street vendors already hawking their goods. There was no running water upstairs, so every drop for drinking, cooking, and washing had to be hauled up from a public fountain. And what about the bathroom? Forget private en-suites. Most people used a simple chamber pot, which would then be emptied, sometimes directly out the window onto the street below. It's no wonder pedestrians had to be on high alert. Once you were up and ready, it was time to head out. But work wasn't a commute to a distant office. For many artisans and shopkeepers, their home and workplace were one and the same. The ground floor of the insula often opened directly onto the street, serving as a workshop or a small storefront. Picture a baker pulling hot loaves from a wood-fired oven, the smell mixing with the scent of a tanner treating leather next door, and a potter spinning clay just a few feet away. This created a lively, if sometimes overwhelming, sensory experience. The streets were the arteries of the city, teeming with life. You'd navigate a dense crowd of people from all walks of life. Slaves running errands, soldiers marching in formation, wealthy citizens carried on litters, and children chasing stray dogs. There were no traffic lights, no pedestrian crossings, just a constant, fluid, and often chaotic flow of humanity. And the noise. It was a constant symphony of human activity, animal sounds, and the rumble of commerce. Of course, a major part of the day was dedicated to food. Supermarkets didn't exist, so daily trips to the market, or forum, were essential. The forum was more than just a place to buy groceries. It was the city's social and commercial hub. Imagine vast open squares flanked by grand temples and government buildings, but filled with makeshift stalls selling everything imaginable. You could find fresh produce, fish straight from the coast, exotic spices from faraway lands, live chickens, and cuts of meat hanging in the open air. Haggling was not just common, it was expected. You'd argue with the vendor over the price of olives, listen to a politician giving a speech on a nearby platform, and catch up on the latest gossip with your neighbors all in the same place. This was where you felt the true pulse of the city. Fast food was also a big deal. For those living in small apartments without proper kitchens, street food vendors or thermopolia were a lifesaver. These stalls sold hot, ready-to-eat meals like lentil soup, cheese and sausages, served from large terracotta pots set into a counter. It was the ancient world's version of a takeout joint. After a long day of work, it was time for leisure. And for the Romans, that meant one thing above all else: the baths. The public baths, or thermae, were incredible social centers. They were far more than just a place to get clean. They were sprawling complexes that often included hot and cold pools, saunas, exercise yards, libraries, and even gardens. You go there not just to bathe, but to meet friends, conduct business, exercise, and relax. It was a daily ritual for people from almost every social class. For a small entry fee, you could spend hours socializing and unwinding. Imagine moving from a hot room to sweat out the day's grime, to a warm pool for a chat, and finally to a cold plunge to feel refreshed. This was the ancient equivalent of the gym, the spa, and the community center all rolled into one. It was an essential part of the urban fabric, providing a level of public hygiene and social interaction that was truly remarkable for its time. As evening fell, the city didn't necessarily go to sleep, but it did change its character. Street lighting was non-existent. Once the sun went down, the city was plunged into darkness, save for the flickering light of oil lamps from windows and the occasional torch carried by those brave enough to venture out. The unlit, narrow alleyways could be dangerous, with crime being a real concern. For this reason, most people stayed indoors after dark. The evening meal, or cena, was the main meal of the day. If you were wealthy, this could be an elaborate multi-course banquet with entertainment. But for the average person, it was a much simpler affair, perhaps consisting of bread, cheese, vegetables, and maybe some porridge. It was a time for a family to gather, share stories from the day, and find some peace away from the relentless energy of the city streets. They would gather around a small lamp, the sounds of the city finally beginning to quiet down, bringing their day to a close. So, what have we learned about life in an ancient city? It was a world of incredible contrasts. It was noisy, smelly, and crowded. It lacked the basic sanitation and safety we take for granted today. Yet it was also vibrant, communal, and full of energy. The public spaces, from the forum to the baths, created a powerful sense of community and shared civic identity. People lived their lives in public in a way that is hard for us to imagine now. Their homes might have been small, but the city itself was their living room. It was a world where you were constantly surrounded by your fellow citizens, sharing in the daily struggles and simple pleasures of urban life. From the morning bread to the evening bath, life was a shared experience, lived out loud on the grand stage of the ancient metropolis. It was a challenging life, for sure, but also one that was deeply human and interconnected. Thank you so much for joining us on this tour of ancient city life. I hope it's given you a new perspective on what it was truly like to live in these incredible places. It's one thing to read about emperors and generals, but it's another to imagine the daily rhythm of life for the millions who called these cities home. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to History of the Ancient World for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments which ancient city you would love to visit if you had a time machine. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.